What if the very blood running through your veins holds a secret that nature never intended to keep? What if the human body, designed by eons of evolution to nurture life, sometimes fights against its own creation because it recognizes a stranger in the womb? In the quiet rhythm of the heart beneath the skin where the pulse beats like a distant drum, there lies a story older than the pyramids and deeper than the ocean floor. It is a silence that weighs heavy on the soul, a biological echo of a forgotten lineage that the history books have tried to smooth over with the dust of time. They tell us we are purely of this earth, evolved in an unbroken chain from the primates that swing in the canopy, sharing the rhesus protein that binds all our animal kin together. But for some of you, that link is broken, that protein is missing, and the blood runs cold with a question that science struggles to answer. If we are all from here, why does your blood look like it came from the Close your heavy eyes and subscribe if you are ready to explore the histories that refuse to stay buried in the dark. And before we drift into the past, whisper into the comments. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Let us settle into the darkness together, leaving the noise of the modern world behind. Imagine the room around you dissolving, the walls turning to mist, the floor beneath you becoming the soot-yielding earth of a time before maps were drawn. There is a comfort in the unknown, a soft blanket of mystery that we wrap around ourselves when the answers given by the daylight do not quite fit the questions we hold in the dark. We are going to walk a path tonight that winds through the microscopic valleys of your own biology and out across the vast windswept plains of human history. We speak often of the soul, of the mind, of the memories we cherish, but we rarely speak of the liquid history that cycles through us, 72 times a minute, driven by the tireless engine of the heart. Blood is more than fuel, it is a record. It is an archive written in a language of proteins and enzymes, a genetic scroll that details every survival, every plague, every migration, and every mating that your ancestors survived. Science tells us that we are a singular species, Homo sapiens, a lonely twig on the great tree of life that managed to outlast all its cousins. We are told that we rose from the dust of the earth, evolved slowly, agonizingly over millions of years from the primitive primates that roamed the savannas and the jungles. And for the most part, the archive in our blood confirms this story. We look at the great apes, the chimpanzees, the gorillas, and we see the reflection of our own hands, our own eyes, and indeed our own blood. There is a marker, a specific biological tag found on the surface of blood cells that serves as the proof of this kinship. In the year 1940, two men of science, Karl Landsteiner and Alexander Wiener, peered through their microscopes and discovered something fundamental about the nature of our lineage. They were studying the rhesus macaque, a small tawny-colored monkey native to Asia. In the blood of this monkey, they found a specific antigen, a protein on the surface of the red blood cells. Think of an antigen like a flag planted on a fortress wall. It signals to the body's immune system. I belong here. I am part of the self. Do not attack. Landsteiner and Wiener named this protein the RH factor, in honor of the rhesus monkey from which it was identified. They then turned their lenses upon humanity. They tested sample after sample looking for this same primal flag, and they found it. The vast majority of human beings carry this protein if you have O-positive blood, or A-positive or B-positive. That positive stands for the presence of the rhesus factor. It connects you biologically and undeniably to the rhesus monkey, and by extension to the long unbroken chain of primate evolution on this planet. It is the mark of Earth. It is the signature of the terrestrial family tree. Roughly 85% of the global population carries this mark. They are Rh positive. Their blood sings the same song as the macaque, the chimp, and the lemur. But then, there are the others, the remaining 15%. When the scientists tested this minority, they found silence where the flag should be. The protein was missing. The antigen was absent. They called this condition Rh negative. Now, let your mind drift over the implications of that simple medical term. Negative, lacking, without. But in the language of evolution, absence is a heavy thing. Evolution builds. It adds complexity. It modifies what is already there. To be Rh negative means that somewhere in the murky depths of prehistory a mutation occurred, or perhaps an introduction occurred, that stripped this universal primate marker from the bloodline. Or perhaps, and this is the whisper that keeps the open-minded awake at night, perhaps that marker was never there to begin with for this specific lineage. If the Rh protein links humanity to the ancestors we share with the monkeys, what does the absence of it suggest? Does it suggest that 15% of the population simply lost the connection? Or does it suggest they are connected to something else? This brings us to the first great pillar of our mystery. It is a pillar built not of stone but of tragedy. It is the biological paradox that doctors call hemolytic disease of the newborn. Let us move slowly here, for this is where the science begins to sound like a gothic horror story. In the natural world, reproduction is the highest law. Every instinct, every biological process, from the color of a bird's feather to the scent of a flower, is designed to ensure the continuation of the species. A mother's body is designed to be a sanctuary. The womb is a fortress built to protect the vulnerable life growing within it. Nature does not sabotage its own future. A lioness does not reject her cub because of its blood. A chimpanzee mother does not develop antibodies to destroy the life inside her. And yet, among humans, this war happens. But it only happens in a very specific, very peculiar configuration. It happens when an Rh negative mother carries an Rh positive child. Picture the biology of this. The mother is Rh negative. Her blood is pure of the rhesus monkey protein. It is her natural state. She conceives a child with an Rh-positive father. The child inherits the father's blood. The child carries the rhesus protein. To the mother's immune system, that ancient, vigilant army that patrols the veins hunting for viruses, bacteria, and intruders, this protein is a stranger. It is an alien invader. During the first pregnancy, the two bloodlines usually do not mix enough to cause a catastrophe. The mother's body is merely watching. It notices the stranger. It takes note of the foreign protein. But it is during the birth or perhaps a trauma that the blood mixes. The rhesus protein enters the mother's bloodstream, and the alarm is sounded. Her body, in a twist of tragic efficiency, begins to manufacture antibodies. These are not the antibodies of nurturing. These are the weapons of war. They are specifically designed to hunt down and destroy red blood cells that carry the rhesus protein. Now imagine the second pregnancy. The Rh-negative mother is again carrying an Rh-positive child, but this time her body remembers. The immune system does not see a baby. It does not see a son or a daughter. It sees an infection. It sees a virus. And so, the mother's own blood turns against the life inside her. Her antibodies cross the placental barrier, the very shield meant to protect the child, and they launch an attack on the fetus's blood cells. They shatter the red blood cells, causing severe anemia, brain damage, and often heart failure. Before modern medicine intervened with the RhoGAM shot in the late 1960s, this resulted in thousands of stillbirths and blue babies, infants born struggling for breath, their blood decimated by their own mother's defenses. Pause for a moment and let the weight of that sink in. Why? Why would nature, the master architect, design a system where a mother kills her own offspring? This phenomenon occurs naturally in no other animal on Earth. Hybrids of different species, like a horse and a donkey creating a mule, are often sterile, yes. But the mother does not try to kill the mule in the womb. The immunological rejection we see in Rh incompatibility is violent and active. It acts exactly like the rejection of a transplanted organ. If you put a kidney from a stranger into your body, your immune system attacks it because it knows that tissue is not self. So we must ask the unsettling question. Why does the Rh-negative mother's body view the Rh-positive baby as not self? Why does it view the rhesus protein, the mark of earthly primates, as a foreign contagion that must be purged? Some scientists dismiss this as a simple mutation, a genetic glitch. But mutations usually survive because they offer an advantage. What is the evolutionary advantage of a trait that turns a mother against her child? Such a trait should have been weeded out by natural selection thousands of years ago. A genetic line that destroys its own offspring does not survive. And yet, the Rh-negative bloodline has persisted. It has survived. And this persistence leads us to look at the timeline of when this glitch first appeared. We must wind the clock back, past the Roman Empire, past the pyramids, past the dawn of agriculture. We drift back to the Paleolithic era, the Stone Age. Approximately 35,000 years ago, the world was a different place. The great ice sheets covered much of the north. The Neanderthals, our stocky, resilient cousins, were fading into the twilight of extinction. And suddenly, in the archaeological record, something new appears. A new type of human, taller, more slender, with a larger cranial capacity and a sudden explosive capacity for art, tool-making, and complex language. We call them Cro-Magnon man. And it is here in the genetic pockets of Europe, where Cro-Magnon settled most densely, that we find the highest concentrations of Rh-negative blood. Geneticists have traced the mutation back to this window of time. Before 35,000 years ago, the evidence for Rh-negative blood is scant to non-existent. It appears almost abruptly in the slow grinding march of evolution. Traits usually emerge over hundreds of thousands of years. They drift in slowly, but Rh-negative blood seems to have arrived with a sudden intensity, concentrated in a specific region, among a specific people. If we evolved solely from the apes of Africa, continuously and linearly, we should all be Rh positive. The sudden appearance of the negative factor is like a footprint appearing in fresh snow where no one has walked. It implies an intervention. It implies a deviation. Think of the isolation of those early days. Small tribes huddled in the cavernous mouths of the earth, painting bulls and stills on the ceilings. Among them, a bloodline emerged that was fundamentally incompatible with the old world. A bloodline that, when mixed with the original stock, triggered a biological alarm system. Is it possible that hemolytic disease of the newborn is not a disease at all? Is it possible that it is a defense mechanism? But a defense against what? Usually a defense mechanism protects purity. It protects the integrity of a system. If the Rh-negative mother's body is trying to destroy the Rh-positive fetus, it is acting as if the Rh-positive blood is a contamination. It is acting as if the link to the primate, the link to the rhesus monkey is a step backward. Or perhaps it is simply the violent friction of two completely different species trying to merge. Picture a lock and a key. For millions of years, the lock and key of primate reproduction fit perfectly. Then 35,000 years ago, someone changed the lock, or someone brought a new key. This timeline coincides with the sudden leap in human consciousness. The Great Leap Forward, anthropologists call it. The moment we stopped merely surviving and started creating. We started looking at the stars not just as lights but as destinations. Is it a coincidence that the blood type most resistant to the old genetics appeared at the exact same moment humanity gained its modern soul? The science gives us the what and the when, It tells us that Rh negative blood lacks the antigen. It tells us it appeared roughly 35,000 years ago. It tells us that the bodies of these mothers fight a desperate war against the blood of the majority. But science falls silent when we ask why. It shrugs and calls it a random mutation. But randomness rarely creates such specific targeted exclusion. Randomness rarely creates a biological barrier between two groups of the same species. This barrier feels constructed. It feels like a firewall. As we drift deeper into this mystery, we must consider the possibility that the human race is not one single family, but a family into which a stranger married long ago, a stranger who brought a gift or a curse hidden in the plasma, a stranger whose legacy is protected by a biological gatekeeper that stands ready to attack anything that resembles the old world. The rhesus monkey swings in the trees, possessing the protein that binds the earth together. But the Rh negative individual stands apart, carrying a silent void where that protein should be. And in that void, in that missing piece of the puzzle, lies the shadow of a different ancestor. We have spoken of the biological evidence, the war in the womb, the timeline of the mutation. These are the cold, hard facts of hematology and anthropology. But facts are only the skeleton of the truth. The flesh of the truth is found elsewhere. It is found in the whispers of folklore. It is found in the strange traits and characteristics reported by those who carry this blood. It is found in the obsession of ancient kings to keep their bloodlines pure. Why were they so afraid of mixing? What did they know about the consequences of mingling the blood of the gods with the blood of men? Perhaps they knew that the mixing brings the sickness. Perhaps they knew that the blood of the outsider does not play well with the blood of the earth. As your breathing slows and your mind opens to the possibilities, consider this. If you are Rh negative, your body is unique. You are a biological outlier. And the clues to your origin might not be found in a biology textbook, but in the traits that make you feel different. Have you ever felt that the room is too hot when others are cold? Have you ever felt that your heart beats to a slower rhythm than the world around you? These are not just imaginings, they are echoes of the first clue. We have examined the blood itself. Now, we must examine the vessel that carries it. We must look at the people themselves, because the anomaly does not stop at the cellular level. It bleeds out into the very nature of being. The science of rejection is only the first door we have unlocked tonight. Behind it lies a hallway of mirrors reflecting strange patterns that have persisted for millennia. Patterns that suggest that while we may all walk on the same earth, we do not all come from the same clay. The rhesus factor is the tether to the primate. Cutting that tether leaves one drifting away from the known and towards a horizon that history has forgotten. Or perhaps a horizon that history has been made to forget. The blood remembers what the mind has lost. And the blood of the Rh negative is remembering a time before the rhesus, a time of the negative, a time of the pure source. So we leave the microscope on the desk. We leave the sterile lights of the laboratory. We step out into the twilight of human experience, where the strange anecdotes and the persistent legends begin to gather like fireflies. The biology has given us the foundation. It has proven that a difference exists. It has proven that the body knows this difference and will fight to the death to maintain it. Now we must ask, who are these people, and what else makes them different? The answers lie in the curious traits that seem to follow this bloodline like a shadow. Traits that sound less like medical symptoms and more like the descriptions of a different species entirely. We move from the cells to the self, from the antibodies to the aura, from the red blood to the blue blood. Listen closely to the beat of your own heart as we turn the page. For the story is about to become personal. There is a quiet curiosity that settles over those who carry this lineage. It is a feeling of separation, a subtle nagging sense that the world is slightly out of focus, or perhaps that the observer is looking through a different lens than the rest of humanity. When we move away from the strict pathology of the hospital ward, we enter the realm of the anecdotal. We enter the quiet confessions whispered in doctors' offices and shared on the fringes of genetic forums. Those with the Rh negative factor often report a collection of physical traits that, while not diagnostic, form a persistent pattern, a constellation of anomalies. Consider the pulse, the rhythm of life that beats within the chest. For the majority of the human population, the heart maintains a steady, hurried pace, driving the iron-rich blood through the veins with urgency. But for many with the negative blood, the heart beats slower. A lower resting heart rate is frequently reported, not as a result of athletic training, but as a natural baseline. It is a calm, methodical thrumming, like an engine idling at a deeper frequency. Accompanying this slow rhythm is often a lower body temperature, a coolness to the touch. While the average human burns at 98.6 degrees, the Rh negative individual often runs cooler, hovering in the 97s or lower. They are the cold hands in a warm room. They are the ones who crave the heat of the sun yet burn easily under its gaze. It is as if their metabolism is tuned to a different environment entirely. Perhaps an environment that was cooler, darker, or simply elsewhere. There is also the matter of pressure. Many exhibit naturally low blood pressure, a lack of tension in the vessels that defies the stress of the modern world. It paints a picture of a physiology that is essentially efficient, a body that does not waste energy, a body that is waiting. And then there are the senses, the way the world enters the mind. Reports of heightened sensitivity are common. An acute awareness of light, unable to tolerate the harsh glare that others ignore. A sensitivity to sound, hearing the hum of electricity or the frequencies that others cannot perceive. It is a nervous system that is wired for high gain, alert, watchful. Some researchers of the paranormal, and we must tread lightly here, drifting into the mist of speculation, have suggested that this sensitivity extends beyond the five senses. They speak of intuition, of psychic dreams, of a feeling of not belonging to this time or this place, a sensation of profound alienation, as if one is a castaway waiting for a ship that never returns. Is this simply the psychological burden of being different? Or is it a cellular memory? A biological longing for a home that is no longer on the map? Even the skeletal structure has been scrutinized by those looking for the mark of the outsider. There are claims persistent in the lore of extravertebrae, of a tailbone structure that differs slightly from the norm, of an extra rib. While medical science dismisses these as normal variations within the human family, the pattern of these claims is fascinating in itself. Why do we look for these differences? Why do we feel the need to find a physical marker for the feeling of otherness? Perhaps because the blood is invisible. We search the surface for what is hidden in the veins. And speaking of veins, we find ourselves drawn to a phrase that has echoed through the halls of power for centuries. Blue blood. Today we use it as a metaphor for aristocracy, for wealth, for the elite. But where did this term originate? History tells us it comes from the Spanish sangre azul. It referred to the old Castilian families who claimed to be of pure Visigoth descent, untouched by the mixing of the Moors. Their skin was so pale that the network of veins beneath appeared vividly blue against the white. But let us look deeper. Let us look with the eyes of the lore keeper. Why was this pallor, this visibility of the veins prized above all else? Why was it a sign of nobility? In nature, the color blue is rare. In blood, it is even rarer. Most life on Earth uses iron to carry oxygen, hemoglobin, which turns red. But there are ancient lineages, crustaceans, arachnids, mollusks that use copper, hemocyanin, and their blood is blue. Now, I am not suggesting that the royal families of Europe were crabs or spiders, but I am suggesting that the obsession with blue blood might be a linguistic fossil. A memory of a time when the rulers, the gods who walked among men, were physically distinct. Perhaps their skin was cold. Perhaps their blood, though red, carried a different chemistry, a chemistry that the Rh negative factor mimics or preserves. Look at the obsession the royal lineages had with purity. History views the rampant inbreeding of the European monarchies, the Habsburg jaw, the hemophilia of the Romanovs, as a tragedy of political greed. They married cousin to keep the land and the power within the family. That is the official narrative. But what if the motivation was deeper? What if it was subconscious? What if they were trying to preserve a specific genetic trait? A recessive trait. A trait that would be washed away if they mixed with the common blood. The Rh-positive blood of the masses. They were trying to keep the God gene intact. They believed their right to rule was divine, that it was in their biology, and perhaps originally it was. But nature, as we have seen, fights against this isolation. The gene pool requires diversity to survive. By closing the circle, they destroyed themselves. The biology failed, but the blood remained, scattered now, diluted, hidden in the general population. Yet there are places on this earth where the concentration remains high. Places where the blood did not scatter but gathered. Like a pool of water in a drying riverbed. We must travel now. We leave the palaces of inbred kings and the sterile labs of modern science. We drift south, and we drift back in time. We are going to the mountains, specifically the Pyrenees. The jagged, mist-covered wall of stone that separates Spain from France. This is a land of deep green valleys and rocky peaks, a land that has always been a fortress. And here, living in the shadow of the limestone, we find the Basque people, the Euskaldunak. To the casual tourist, they are simply a unique culture within Europe. But to the geneticist, they are a baffling anomaly. They are a riddle wrapped in a mystery hidden inside a mountain range. The Basque people possess the highest concentration of Rh-negative blood in the world, while the global average hovers around 15%. In the Basque country, it surges to nearly double that in some areas. Furthermore, almost all Basque people have type O blood, and specifically O-negative, the universal donor. Let us pause on that concept. The universal donor. Blood that can be given to any human on Earth. It is pure life force. It is accepted by all. But the carrier of O-negative blood can receive from no one but their own kind. They can give to the world, but the world cannot give back to them. It is a biological one-way street. A perfect metaphor for a lineage of gods or watchers. Beings who sustain the population but remain genetically separate from it. Why is this blood concentrated here in this rugged corner of Europe? The Basque claim to be the oldest family in Europe. And science reluctantly agrees. Genetic markers link the Basque people directly to the Cro-Magnon man, the early modern humans who appeared on the continent roughly 35,000 to 40,000 years ago. This timeline is crucial. Before 40,000 years ago, Europe was the domain of the Neanderthal. Thick-boned, robust, adapted to the cold. And then suddenly the Cro-Magnon arrived. Taller, more slender, with high foreheads and complex tools, and we suspect with Rh-negative blood. The Basque are the direct descendants of this sudden arrival. They did not migrate from the east with the other Indo-Europeans who brought farming and bronze. They were already there, watching from the mountains. They remained isolated, resisting the genetic mixing of the Roman Empire, the Moors, the Visigoths, and the Franks. They held the line, and because they held the line, they preserved the blood. But the blood is not the only evidence they kept. There is the language. Euskara. If you listen to it spoken, it sounds like nothing else in Europe. It sounds like the grinding of stones. like the wind through a canyon. Linguists call it a language isolate. This is a polite way of saying they have absolutely no idea where it comes from. It is an orphan tongue. It has no relation to Spanish, no relation to French, no relation to German, Greek, Latin, or Sanskrit. It is not Indo-European. It stands alone on the linguistic tree, a branch that has no trunk. Some words in Euskara provide chilling glimpses into deep time. The word for knife is essentially the word for stone. The word for ceiling means top of the cavern. These are words coined by a people who lived in the Stone Age, a people who lived in caves. While the rest of the world evolved their languages, blending and borrowing, the Basque kept the original code. Why? Why did this one group huddled in the Pyrenees resist the tide of history so effectively? Perhaps because they knew they were different. Perhaps the biological imperative, the same one that causes a mother's body to reject a positive fetus, was working on a societal level. A cultural immune system, rejection of the outsider, preservation of the self. It is worth noting that the region surrounding the Pyrenees is home to some of the most profound and mysterious cave art in the world. Lascaux, Altamira, Chauvet. These are not crude stick figures, they are masterpieces of perspective, shadow, and movement. They appeared suddenly fully formed around the same time the Rh negative mutation appeared. Around the same time the Cro-Magnon appeared. It was a creative explosion, a sudden upgrade in the human operating system. Mainstream anthropology tells us this was just natural evolution, a lucky roll of the genetic dice. But looking at the Basque, looking at the negative blood, looking at the language that belongs to no one begins to wonder if evolution is the right word. Evolution implies a slow, gradual climb. This was a jump, a quantum leap. If the Basque are the remnants of the original bloodline, the bloodline that brought art and consciousness to Europe, then where did they come from before the mountains? They have no linguistic cousins on Earth. So where is the parent? Where is the source? The Pyrenees may be a reservoir, but they are not the spring. To find the spring, we must look further back. We must leave the green valleys of Europe and turn our eyes toward the dust of the desert. We must look for the records of a civilization that claimed to know exactly where the upgrade came from. A civilization that didn't speak of evolution, but of manufacturing. A civilization that didn't look to the apes for their origins, but to the sky. The blood in the Basque veins is a silent witness. A biological text that has been copied and recopied for 30,000 years. But the original manuscript, the original instructions, those were written on clay, wet, river clay, baked hard by the Mesopotamian sun. The trail of the negative blood does not end in the mountains. It leads us to the cradle of civilization, to the land between the rivers, where the gods first came down to dig, and where the first man, the Adamu, opened his eyes. The clues are shifting now. from the medical to the anthropological to the mythological. But you will find that the line between myth and history is as thin as a cell wall, and just as permeable. Take a breath. Let the mountain air fade from your lungs. Can you smell the dust? Can you smell the ancient Tigris River? We are traveling to Sumer, and the tablets are waiting to speak. We are walking through the heat now, far from the cool, mist-shrouded peaks of the Pyrenees. The air here is thick and dry. It shimmers above the ground, blurring the horizon. Beneath our feet, the ground is baked hard, it is cracked and thirsty. We are in the cradle, Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, the place where history, as we are taught, it supposedly began. But we are not here to look at the ruins of ziggurats as they appear today. We are here to listen to the library. Buried beneath the sands for millennia were thousands upon thousands of tablets, not paper, not papyrus, but clay. The ancients of Sumer did not trust their legacy to materials that could rot or burn. They knew that empires fall. They knew that fire consumes wood and time consumes parchment. So they wrote on the earth itself. They took the wet river silt clay from the banks of the Tigris and the Euphrates. They pressed their wedge-shaped styluses into the soft mud, and then they fired it. They turned their history into stone. This is why we can still hear them. Their voices have survived the fires of conquest and the erosion of wind. And what do these voices say? When we translate the cuneiform looking for the origins of man, we do not find a story of slow, gradual evolution. We do not find a poetic metaphor about nature blooming. We find something far more clinical. We find a record of work, a record of toil, and a record of genetic intervention. The Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki. The word itself is heavy with meaning. Those who from heaven to earth came. Not gods in the spiritual sense, floating in the ether, but beings of substance, beings of immense capability, and surprisingly beings of limitation. The tablets tell us that the Anunnaki were tired. They had arrived on Earth to extract resources. Gold specifically, a metal that holds a strange fascination for our species even today. Perhaps a fascination we inherited. But the work was hard. The younger gods, the rank and file, rebelled against the labor. They cast their tools into the fire. They surrounded the house of Enlil, the commander. They demanded relief. And this is where the history of humanity takes a sharp, unnatural turn in the texts. The solution was not to do the work themselves. The solution was to create a worker, a Lulu, a primitive laborer to carry the yoke of the gods. Enter Enki, the master of waters, the lord of wisdom and science, and Ninhursag, the mother goddess, the midwife of the gods. Together they entered the house of life, a place that sounds less like a temple and more like a laboratory. The texts describe a process that is hauntingly specific. They did not create man from nothing. They did not snap their fingers. They took a creature that already existed, a wild being that roamed the Abzu, the lower lands. Likely an early hominid, a creature of the earth. But this creature lacked the intelligence, the spark to understand commands. It needed an upgrade. It needed the essence of the gods. Listen closely to how the Atrahasis epic describes this act. Let one god be slaughtered, the text says, and let the gods be purified by immersion with his flesh and his blood. Let Nintu mix clay, that God and man may be thoroughly mixed together in the clay, so that we may hear the drumbeat forever. Let there be a spirit from the God's flesh. Look past the ritualistic language. Look past the archaic phrasing. What is being described here? The mixing of two distinct biological lines. The clay represents the earthly genetic material, the structure of the hominid. The blood and flesh of the god represents the external genetic material, the upgrade, the insertion of a new code. They created the Adamu, the first mixed being, and here in the heat of the Sumerian desert, the connection to our blood mystery begins to solidify. If the Rh negative factor is indeed the blood of the gods, it fits this narrative perfectly. The Rh positive blood is the blood of the clay. It is the blood of the rhesus monkey, the blood of the primate lineage that evolved naturally on this planet. It carries the protein of the earth. But the Rh negative blood, the blood that lacks the monkey antigen, that is the subtraction, or perhaps the substitution. It is the signature of the Tima, the essence of the Anunnaki. The Sumerian texts go on to describe the difficulties of this creation. It wasn't perfect on the first try. Enki and Ninhursag made mistakes. They created beings that couldn't walk, beings that couldn't reproduce, beings with internal defects. It reads like a trial and error log of early genetic engineering. But eventually they succeeded. They created a perfect man, a man who could speak, who could learn, and crucially, who could breed. But the breeding brought its own problems, and this brings us to the second piece of our ancient puzzle. We must leave the clay tablets of Sumer for a moment. We must travel west, across the desert to the lands of Canaan, to the Hebrew scribes, and to a book that was so controversial it was removed from the standard Bible, the Book of Enoch. The story changes, but the core truth remains identical. In the Sumerian account, the mixing of blood was a calculated manufacturing process. In the Hebrew tradition, it is remembered as a transgression, a fall. The Book of Enoch describes a group of angels, the Watchers. There were 200 of them, and they descended not to dig gold, but to satisfy a forbidden desire. They landed on Mount Hermon, high, cold, and removed from the world below, and from their vantage point they looked down upon the settlements of early humans. Specifically, they looked at the women. The text says, "And the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." This is the Genesis 6 narrative. But Enoch gives us the details. It tells us that these beings led by an entity named Samyaza made a pact, a mutual oath to commit this sin. They descended, and they began to cohabit with human women. Now, pause. Consider the biological implications of this ancient verse. We are told of two distinct species: the Watchers, celestial, powerful, long-lived, and the daughters of men, terrestrial, shorter-lived, evolved from the earth. They mated, and just as Enki mixed the clay with the blood, the Watchers mixed their seed with humanity. The result was the Nephilim, the giants, the heroes of old, men of renown. But the text also calls them monsters. It says they consumed the produce of the earth, that they turned against humanity, that they drank blood. This narrative is often read as a moral fable about lust and rebellion. But look at it through the lens of the rage negative anomaly. Look at it as a biological memory. If a Watcher had a genetic makeup entirely different from a human woman, what would happen to the pregnancy? Incompatibility. Chaos. The woman's body would recognize the fetus as foreign, as other, just as the Rh-negative mother's body attacks the Rh-positive baby today. Or in the reverse, perhaps the introduction of the Watcher's genetics created a lineage that the earth itself tries to reject. The Book of Enoch lists the knowledge the Watchers gave to humanity. It wasn't just genetics. Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields. He taught women the art of cosmetics, the beautifying of the eyelids. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Barakijal taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations. This sudden explosion of knowledge, this Cambrian explosion of civilization, matches the timeline of the Rh-negative mutation perfectly. Around 35,000 years ago, the same time the Cro-Magnon man appeared, the same time tool use became sophisticated, the same time art appeared on cave walls, and the same time this strange blood entered the pool. The Nephilim were said to be physically different, taller, stronger, fairer of skin, descriptions that eerily match the ancient traits of the Basque people, traits that match the blue bloods of royal lineages who claim divine right to rule. Why did the royals insist on inbreeding? Why did they obsess over keeping the bloodline pure? Perhaps they were trying to hold on to the genetic legacy of the Watchers. Perhaps they knew instinctively that diluting their blood with the common stock, the Rh-positive stock, would diminish their connection to the gods. The ancient texts speak of a great cleansing, the flood. In Sumer, it was Enlil wanting to silence the noise of the humans. In the Bible, it was God grieving that he had made man, seeing the corruption of all flesh. All flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Could this corruption have been the genetic hybridization? Was the flood an attempt to wipe the slate clean? To remove the Nephilim DNA from the ecosystem? If so, it failed. because the blood is still here. It flows in 15% of the population. It hides in the veins of those who look just like everyone else, until they try to bring a life into the world. And then the ancient war restarts, the war between the clay and the starfire, the war between Enki's experiment and the natural order. We have two massive pillars of ancient lore now standing before us. One from the Tigris, written in the clinical language of the laboratory. One from the Jordan, written in the moral language of judgment. They describe the same event, a moment in deep time when the barrier between us and them was breached, a moment when the sky came down to the earth and left a stain that cannot be washed away. Think of the Rh-negative person. The person who can give blood to anyone but can receive from almost no one. The universal donor, a giver of life, but a fragile receiver. Does this not sound like a being that is stranded? A being that is biologically selfless yet biologically isolated? Like a guest who has brought a gift but cannot eat the food at the table. The Sumerians called the first man Adamu, but the root word Adam in Hebrew has deeper meanings. It is linked to Adama, the earth, but it is also linked to Dam, the word for blood, and Adam, the color red. The story is always about the blood of the earth, and the blood that is not. The pieces are drifting together now, like continents moving in the dark. The medical impossibility of a mother fighting her own child, the sudden appearance of the trait 35,000 years ago. The isolated pockets of old Europeans in the Basque Mountains. The Sumerian records of genetic mixing. The Hebrew legends of the fallen angels and their giant offspring. They are not separate stories. They are chapters in the same book. A book written in code. A code comprised of 4 letters, A, C, T, and G. We are building a theory, a bridge between the microscope and the myth. It suggests that we are not all the same, that humanity is not a monolith, but a hybrid, a mosaic. Some of us hold the line of the earth, the pure, unbroken lineage of the primates, adapted perfectly to this rock, and some of us hold the line of the visitors, the watchers, the Anunnaki, the ones who came from the sky, and that distinction is not visible in our faces. It is not visible in our skin color. It is hidden deep in the marrow, waiting to be revealed by a simple antibody test. The desert wind is cooling now. The sun is setting over the ruins of Eridu, Enki's city. The shadows stretch long across the sand. Can you feel the weight of it? The weight of a history that has been stolen from you. They told you that you were an accident of biology, a lucky roll of the evolutionary dice, but the whispers of the ancients say otherwise. They say you were designed. They say you were crafted, and for some of you, they say you are the remnants of a royal house that no longer exists on this planet. We have one final step to take. We have gathered the evidence. The clues are laid out on the table, the blood, the mountains, the clay, the angels. Now, We must weave them into a single coherent tapestry. We must ask the ultimate question. If this is true, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for the soul? If your veins carry the code of the stars, are you truly of this world? Or are you simply waiting to go home? Let the darkness of the desert wrap around you. Let the stars come out above. Look at them. Really look at them. Do they feel distant? Or do they feel familiar? We are moving to the final synthesis, to the hybrid theory, where the science meets the spirit. Rest your eyes. The journey is almost done, and the truth is waiting in the silence. This video is intended for entertainment, relaxation, and sleep. The content explores alternative historical theories, ancient mysteries, and interpretations that are not universally accepted by mainstream academia. We encourage viewers to conduct their own research,